was your inspiration for your Travelling Bookshop series?
Well, actually, the series started with a bit of a different idea. I remember probably about 5 or more years ago, maybe even 8 years ago, when I got to the end of a series and I was thinking, what next? I came up with all these ideas. And one of the ideas I had was Miss Lily's travelling lolly shop. And I had this idea that Miss Lily would have a few young girls, like it'd be old fashioned, like they were apprentice girls, who would travel around in Miss Lily's hot air balloon with her. And the hot air balloon would go wherever it was taken, and wherever it landed was where Miss Lily set up her lolly shop, which was where her lollies would be needed, where something would happen where her lollies would change someone's life. And I thought, oh, that doesn't make sense. Lollies, lollies, although they're lovely, are actually not necessary and they
Yeah.
don't change lives. Anyway, so I put that idea aside for ages. And then about 5 years down the track, then I was talking with my publisher about what next for the younger readers. What would I do? And I said, look, I've got this idea that I sort of like, but it's not quite working. And we chatted about it for a while. And she said, yeah, tell me more about that. So we chatted for a while and I said, do you know, it doesn't have to be lollies though, does it? It could be something else that they're selling in the shop, like books. And the minute I said books, it was like my imagination exploded and I thought, that's it. This is the story. Excuse me. Because I believe books are necessary and books absolutely do change lives. So as soon as I said that, both my publisher and I got very excited, and then the story idea developed from there.
Did you always have a set picture in mind of Mim, or did she come to you after you switched to the bookshop?
Certainly after I switched to the bookshop, because with my publisher, I had this discussion about, well, who would own the bookshop and what form the bookshop would take. So I muddled over that for a couple of weeks, I think, about what form the bookshop would take and who the family would be too. And I decided that it wouldn't be a traditional family of mum and dad and kids, because I think we need to show all sorts of families in stories. And so I decided, rather than it being a single mum, a single dad would be a good setting for the family, good family composition. And then I sort of, Mim came to me fairly early on the piece because she was going to be the centre of it, but I certainly worked a lot at her to get her right. Nat was probably the one that changed the most during the process of planning, because I'd had him as a baby at first, where he'd be, dangling off the back of the caravan on elastic ropes and all sorts of things. But I thought if I wanted him to be a really active part of the story and really funny, he needed to be actively out there with Mim and involved. So his age had to go up. A lot of all these things, it sounds really random, but a lot of the decisions that are made once you've got your core story and your core character, which is Mim in this case, come down to problem solving, which is, how do I tell the story I want to tell in the best way?
Did you always think about them collecting things? Because Mim collects words and then um her brother collects the letters as well, or about anything as well.
Yeah, no, right from the start, I'd had this discussion with my publisher about who would Mim be and what sort of components would be fun in the story. And I love the idea of Mim collecting words and letters, as in not single letters, as in letters written by people, and gathering things that might actually be a clue or have some sort of key to the story. I didn't quite know how that would fit in there, but I love words myself, and I get really amused by ambiguous signs and all those sorts of things, or by lovely names of shops and all sorts of things. So I thought, well, that was a great starting point for Mim. And then, again, as stories went on, I found ways that her word collections would add to the story. So that was definitely something that was going to be part of it at the start. And then Nat, I thought it would be fun if he sort of mimicked Mim in some way, but he was too little. And I thought it'd be fun if he just had an obsession with one letter at a time. And, I love the idea of, I didn't love it when my own kids did it, but love the idea of him drawing letters on, the pillowcases and the walls and the roof, and collecting letters and spotting letters in other sort of shapes and things. So that developed as a result of Mim's collecting, really.
I love how they interact as well. That's like perfect siblings. especially
Yeah, yeah. And there's that lovely obsession, isn't there, with Nat and, wanting to be his own person and have his own stuff, even though he's obviously following Mim and Dad a lot of the way.
it's what drew you to writing in the first place?
I think it was really the magic of story for children. I used to be a school teacher, and I loved in the classroom. My favourite part in the classroom was when we'd sit down and share a story, whether it was a novel with older children or a picture book with younger children. I just loved the magic of that taking us all out of the classroom and away to another world. And I feel like a shared story is one of the few times in the classroom that every child can participate and have a sense of success and belonging. I think that's a really powerful moment in the classroom, just through the magic of story. And I really loved sharing stories with my own children when they were little. So I think it was largely a desire to be a part of that storytelling for children, be a part of that creating of magic. But if I went right back to the start of my passion for writing, it's probably because of a wonderful English teacher I had at school in year 11 and 12, and she was passionate about literature, and I really caught her passion from literature, for passion for literature from her.
It's always interesting that it always comes back to it be a teacher sparking
Yeah.
inspiration as well. And I'm a teacher as well, so I love always reading. Every day after lunch, it's always a story as well, sharing a
Yeah.
story with the kids. I absolutely love it. So
Yeah, it's so powerful on so many levels, isn't it? But I was just thinking recently about the power of story, and I believe it's wonderful that we can escape to another world, and it can show children so many possibilities. But I was thinking about it quite seriously for a talk I was giving recently, and I thought it is a moment where all children are successful, isn't it?
Yeah,
No matter what class is, and no matter how wonderful the teacher is, there will sometimes be times in every child's day where they are feeling not able, whether it's sport or maths or English, but everyone can sit and enjoy a story, can't they?
you can. And especially the
Yeah.
ones who like they gravitate to a particular story. So if I have like a bookshelf of books and after I read them, like they'll all particularly go to one story that stood out to them and they love, and they'll just keep rereading the books over and over in time. And if
Yeah,
it's like, I'm not too
that's
sure what to
magical.
read, what would I read? It's always their favorite book they go pick.
Yeah, and that's fine, isn't it? Because we do that as adult readers too, don't we? We
Yeah.
go back to those familiar things that have made us excited or happy, and that's wonderful. That's creating, the next generation of readers just like us. Yeah, it's wonderful.
What was your approach to world and character building for Traveling Bookshop and your other books in general as well? That did it
Yeah. So
change?
for something, uh, I usually start with a place. I don't set in fantasy settings, so I always start with a real place. And so one of my first steps when I've chosen the place is to really look closely at that place and write all the things I know myself about that. Like I do mind maps and I gather pictures if I've been there, or I look online for images, and then I do some research. So wherever that place is, I take note of all the elements that are possibly going to be involved in my story. I like to have a strong sense of setting, but also any element of a place where the story's set, whether it's culture or buildings or landscape, animals, food, anything that's unique about that setting becomes a possible element in the story. And this is particularly the case in something like the Travelling Bookshop or The Girl, the Dog and the Writer, where there's sort of almost travel books as well as stories. So those elements become very significant, but I'm always looking out for possible elements that can be tangled up in the story in a fun way or a significant way. And so all those elements are going around in my head until I pick out what's going to happen throughout the story. With character building, to me, character absolutely sits at the centre of a story. It's so important. And so I always make sure that my key characters are people that I like, or if they're a villain that I find incredibly despicable, but that's also fun to write those characters. But I have a set of activities that I always do with all my main characters to get to know them well before I start writing my story. And so that's things like obviously their name and age and who they are, but also I think about what their goals might be, their loves, their hates, what their appearance is, what they choose to wear or what they don't have a choice in wearing. Just a whole heap of simple things, but they really get me thinking more deeply about my character. And
Do
so
you,
then if I've got my thinking, sorry,
I know,
it's
do
just
you then do you base something on people that you know as well? Do you take pictures of things from people you know for your story characters, or bits of yourself and put them into your characters?
absolutely, absolutely. I think that's part of being a good writer, isn't it? That we're good observers and we notice things about people. So we're always drawing on those traits of people. It mightn't be a whole person that we put in there, but if, for instance, we're writing about you know, a happy school teacher, you might draw on all the happy people and the people who like children and that, and think of what did they do, what did they say, you know, and what sort of person looks like a happy person and all those things. I draw on all those things and put them together, but definitely I'm using whole new creations with my characters, but drawing always on the people I know and on myself. I think I always put a lot of myself into my main character.
I think that's important. So everyone, like, even though I'm not the age of Mim, I can see myself in her with her love of
Yeah.
books and, her steadfast belief that, they're not, her dad's not giving the correct book to the
Yeah.
people. She knows better, but at the end,
I know, I know better, Dad. Yeah.
it's perfect. I'm like, yes, I can see why you're thinking that, Mim.
Oh dear.
So after you've done
Hmm.
world and character building, what's the process for when you're writing your books?
I definitely, as well as the world and character building, I do loads of notes. So I have a time for weeks where I just am planning a story. And the planning really starts with just a lot of brainstorming and writing down any ideas that pop into my head. So if I'm doing a bit of research about, for the Travelling Bookshop, for instance, about a place or animals, other stuff comes up that might lead to new mind maps and lists and ideas for the story. So I end up with a whole heap of ideas and notes. And then I rein them in. Then I start to think, well, which are the things that really fit best for this setting and for this problem that I've chosen for the story. And so then I start culling notes and organising them into a proper plan. And then I do follow the plan generally once I start writing. I find that I need to have an idea of where the story's going and who the key characters are going to be. So it deviates. Of course, you come up with great ideas along the way that take you away from that, straight line of the plot you've set out. But I do follow my plan quite closely most of the time.
It's interesting to hear different ways people plan their books. There's like plotters, and then some people I've interviewed, it's like the pantsers, they'll just go anywhere when they're writing. I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
think I could do that.
It is funny though, because I say I plan really carefully, but just recently I looked over, might have been for a talk or a class or something I was doing. I looked over my synopsis for We Are Wolves and I thought, oh, that's a bit different to how it ended up. Generally I'd followed the plan, and certainly the characters were who I'd planned for them to be, and the general flow of things. But I was surprised at how much I'd deviated from my very well scripted plan. Yeah.
Do you have any books or authors that inspired you to become a writer, or inspire you in when you're for new books that you possibly think of?
I think certainly at the start of my writing, I was really inspired by some really lovely picture book writers. Like my children really loved Dr. Seuss, the fun of that, and they loved Janet and Alan Alberg, the Happy Postman and Each Peach Pear Plum, those beautiful, gentle, pretty books. And Pamela Allen, we loved Pamela Allen books. And oddly, I always thought, when I decided to start writing, I really thought I'd be writing picture books. That was really what I aspired to. But I just always had, my sense of humour was too old for that. And also I had too many words. But those picture book writers definitely were a huge inspiration. The other writers that I found incredibly inspiring, just seeing the joy they brought to the children I taught and to my own children, were writers like Dave Pilkey, you know, the Captain Underpants books, and Andy Griffiths. Like the hilarity that provided in our home to share those books was really uplifting. And the other author who I'm just still constantly inspired by is Morris Gleitzman. I just love his war stories, his Felix stories, and Girl Overboard, Girl Underground, and Boy Overboard, and is it 3 Weeks with the Queen, 2 Weeks with the Queen? All those ones.
Yeah.
He just is the master storyteller with taking a really serious topic but making it accessible for young readers, age appropriate and funny even. Like, he's really great at dealing really meaningfully with those things, but also keeping it light enough and accessible for young readers. So I continually am inspired by his capacity to do that.
I love seeing all the books now that deal with topics that are in the curriculum a bit much more, and how you can actually read it to the kids, especially like year 3 and up, so they can actually learn about what they're needing to know in a more accessible way that we didn't have
Yeah.
before as well.
Yeah, and that is really the power, isn't it, of a well-told story that deals with big issues, whether it's contemporary issues or whether it's with history, is that we can package it in a way that makes it entertaining and meaningful to children. Whereas sometimes those big issues or the history, they're not on their own. They're either dry, or with history, often there's so much that's not appropriate for children to be dealing with. But we want them to know, don't we? We want them to know how we got to this point in history, or we want them to be starting to be aware of other people's lives and how to be kind and how to make the world a better place, basically.
We always learn from the past, so we shouldn't make the same mistakes.
Yeah, well, hopefully we do.
Hopefully.
We might, maybe not everyone does, but hopefully we do.
What was
Yeah.
the most valuable piece of advice you've been given about writing?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because I think really I've learned a lot along the way from working with my editor. I have a wonderful editor who I've worked with for many years called Kate Burnett, and she is a genius. She's just brilliant, and I think I've learned from the process I've gone through with her every time I've written, and she's like the voice in my head. So sometimes if I think, oh, this will be okay, and then I think, no, Kate will say, no, I don't think this is right. So I go back and write it the way I think Kate would like me to do it the best way. So that's been really powerful to have that long-term relationship with an incredibly clever, passionate editor. But I would say the single piece of advice that was most powerful for me was from my history teacher when I was in my first year at university. I studied English and literature, did an arts degree. Studied English literature and history for my arts degree. And I had this wonderful lecturer in European history for my first year of uni. Again, another really passionate teacher. His name was David Kent, and he was this very small, quietly spoken man, but just so passionate about his work. And I remember the first time I handed in an assignment, he said to me, this is great. The way you can make it just that tiny bit better is with your writing. If you just keep your sentences tighter, just shorter sentences, tighten up the way you put your words into each sentence. And that sticks with me. I mean, I disobey that rule at times. At times you want a rambling, when your character's doing a big ramble about something, or it's, it's action and you want it to go on and on and on and on without stop. Of course you ignore that at times, but I try to keep that in mind too, to keep my sentences tightly wound and not too rambling, which obviously I haven't learned to do with my voice yet, with my spoken words.
It's the teacher in you.
That's right. Yeah.
What advice would you give to a writer working on their first book, whether it be a child or an adult?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And my answer would be to finish it, to not give up, even if you get to the point where you think, oh, this isn't working or I'm bored with this. My encouragement would be to finish through to the end. even if it never gets published, in writing that first book through to the end, you will learn so much about yourself and about your personal writing process and what works for you. I think also to write a book from beginning right through the hard yards to the end is also practice, and practice anytime is valuable as a writer. But I think really the first big achievement as a writer is not getting published, it's writing that first book through to the end.
Never giving up.
Yeah, exactly. And you will be surprised at what you learn about your process and what works for you, what doesn't work. Yeah, and a sense of satisfaction. Oh, I've done it. I think it proves to you as a writer too that you are committed enough to finish a book. You can talk to a lot of writers, even established published writers who'll say, oh yeah, I've got 1,000 half-finished manuscripts or manuscripts I started and discarded. And of course there are times where you start and it's not working, but there will come a time, I think, in every writer's manuscript where you go, oh, this isn't working, but you forge on and you can fix it up. And even if you can't that first time, it's good to finish.
Yes. And my final question is, who has been your biggest supporter of your writing?
I would definitely say my husband, Carsten. He's always encouraged me with my writing and cheers me on. And now when I'm so busy with my writing, he is such a support practically for me in my life too, with taking up the slack with things that don't get done around the house or cooking or bringing me pots of coffee when I'm working long past the end of the day and things like that. But he reads every book as soon as I get the first copies. He reads that and he encourages me. And he's incredibly tolerant of my vagueness while I'm writing. Often we'll be going for a walk at the end, what I think is the end of day's work. We'll be going for a walk and I'm just not listening to what he's saying. And he knows I'm still in the story. Or we'll be talking and I'll say, I've just solved a problem. That thing where you sort of move away from something and the problem's working somewhere at the back of your mind and you solve the problem for the text. And I said, you just need to remind me when I get home that Mim needs to peel a banana. Or I'll say something really bizarre like that. And we'll get home and he'll say, Mim has to peel a banana. And so he's very supportive in that way of not making fun of me or telling me to concentrate. He's quite tolerant of my living in the story at times when I should be living in the real world.
Perfect. I think that's really good when partners and everything and husbands and that are always supportive. It's always the close family that's the best and biggest support.
And I think too, as a writer, as a creative of any sort, you and in any job, of course, you have times where you're discouraged and doubt yourself, don't you? And you need someone on your side, someone on your team who's going to say, no, you remember all the times you did really well. You can do this. You've got this. So we all need that, don't we?
You do. You got the book. You've done a story for Mim before. You can do another one.
That's right. That's right. You can do it. You've got 6 Mim stories out there already. I still need that though. I still need that encouragement and still have those doubts. And so if you are that writer writing the first book, know that I have those hard yards and those stuck moments and those moments where I don't think I should finish the book but do. Yeah.
Perfect.